Hello everybody and welcome down into my basement for another quick look at what's growing on down here. Today is going to be a little bit focused though because I want to discuss something kind of disturbing that I've been seeing in a couple of the communities that I'm a part of. Now I'm not going to name any names or link any videos, but I have seen a couple of titles lately that kind of suggest that aquaponics really isn't worth the effort or, more importantly, the expense. And that the aquaponic proposition, as it were, just doesn't really work out. And I want to address that today because I think that's total crap. Obviously, anybody who's been watching my channel for a long time knows just how dedicated I am to the overall idea of aquaponics and its usefulness. But for those of you who are new, maybe this is the first time you've seen one of my titles come up. Yeah, let's just cover all of it, shall we? So for those of you who are unaware, the basic premise of an aquaponic garden is you feed your fish. Their waste, as it were, gets converted by a natural biological filter. There are a few different stages of bacteria that ultimately turn the fish waste into useful, productive plant food. And the goal is to grow your herbs, your fruits, your vegetables, whatever, using that as the main source of nutrients. Now, fish food isn't exactly expensive, okay? Like, what these guys get is probably the most expensive fish food out there. I paid $60 for that tub of it that I've been working on for several years. Now, it does not take long to come up with $60 worth of produce, so I'd say that is easily covered by long-term growth of an aquaponic garden. And this particular batch of food was well and truly paid for pardon me, before we ever even moved out to Manitoba. But, that said, let's assume we were starting this situation from scratch, okay? And my garden probably is a really bad example right now because this is definitely a hobby garden, not a productive garden. And I want you to bear in mind, if you look at some of my older videos, my original aquaponic greenhouse, the whole thing, garden, structure, everything, cost me about $500, so less than a really nice bag of golf clubs, okay? But in this case, just this garden here, my investment in fish, I paid about $1 each, so $21 in fish. We'll round that up to $25 for easier math. My investment in food, I had leftover fish food, but that was $60, so we're up to $85. Now this garden I got for free. This is the Euro Grower by General Hydroponics, because I asked them if they could send me something to help my peppers survive, and I guess they felt that soil gardening in a basement wasn't going to do it, and this is what they sent me. They sent me this garden. It retails for about $600 apparently. So this is kind of an expensive starting point. And as I said, I built my whole previous garden and greenhouse for $500. So you do not have to invest in something like this to make it work. This is just something I had because they sent it to me, and I'm not fond of hydroponics with all the chemical nutrients and stuff. And it's not because they're chemicals or anything like that. Ultimately, it's because I don't like changing out the water. Now, I don't know what water costs where you live, but water bills here are kind of an annoyance financially, and I'd rather not add to them if I can. Therefore, having the fish down in the bottom of my aquaponic garden allows me to not have to dump out 30, 40 gallons of water a week. I take a little bit of this for my soil plants, you know, maybe 10% of it comes out. I grab my handy jug here, I refill it, everything's good. There's a lot less waste going on there. So I'm, in general, much happier about that. But we're talking about the value proposition. So right now, this garden, as it sits, if somebody else wanted to set this up, what do we got? We got the garden covered, we got the fish food covered, we got the fish covered. I'm about $100 into these lights because I live in the sticks and it's hard to find things affordably. So $600, $700, and $85, give or take, to make this system. Now, it doesn't really look like it should be worth that much, and it doesn't really sound like that's a good investment, does it? But when it comes to something like gardening of any kind, you have to really consider the long-term investments. Whether you're adding things to your soil to improve it for 1, 2, 3 years down the road, whether you're going through hydroponic nutrients, it doesn't matter. There's going to be continued reinvestment in your garden, and it's a long-term withdrawal to see your return. So basically around here, fresh produce averages $4 a pound, give or take. Okay? So I'm at almost $800 for this garden, so I need almost 200 pounds of food to come out of this. Which is, it sounds like a lot. I've only got 8 planters in this particular garden setup, because that's what came with the system, right? Now you can build aquaponic gardens in a whole lot of different ways, and this isn't necessarily the way I would do it if I was building from scratch. This is basically a Dutch bucket version of an aquaponic garden, but it does work. So for me to get some 200 pounds, sorry I just kicked over a bunch of plant starter cups, for me to get some 200 pounds out of this garden to recover my costs, it's going to take a while. Now bear in mind, I was given the garden, so that takes 600 off of my initial cost, and I've only actually got 200 to recover from this. At $4 a pound, that's 50 pounds of food. That's a lot less. Now what you grow in your aquaponic garden is going to really have a lot to do with determining its long-term value. Something like the ahi panic pepper that I've got here, you can sort of see it in between the lights. This is not a pepper I can buy at the grocery store, therefore to me it is worth more than the standard $4 a pound. This mint, on the other hand, it's pretty standard, but it grows quite abundantly, and I've taken several harvests off that mint just in the last month. I mean, the most recent harvest is sitting upstairs in a mead bottle flavoring that. This basil here, only just transplanted into here, but is already doing much better. You can see the one beside it that I didn't put far enough in there, so it's not actually getting moisture. I might as well pull this out. This is not adding to my long-term return, but this cost me a seed and a little bit of time. So my investment into this plant is not great. I need... Oh look, I've got my return on this basil plant. Something to bear in mind too when you're considering the relative cost and return on investment of any kind of gardening is that things you buy at the grocery store that are labeled as fresh have usually been 3 to 4 weeks off the plant already. So that's not exactly nice and fresh. With this aquaponic garden that I've got in my basement, anything I take off of this is consumed within an hour, unless it's going to be dried or put into something like the mint. So you're getting a lot, I'm getting, I should say, a lot healthier foods out of this than I would if I was spending that $4 a pound at the grocery store. Now sure, my leaves look bad right now. I have not been on top of my deficiencies. And yes, aquaponic gardens do occasionally require additives, but nowhere near as often as with a hydroponic garden. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to do a complete water change. So to me, saving that bit of treated water is definitely worth it. So let's talk about long-term return on investment, okay? Am I going to get $50 or 50 pounds worth of produce out of this garden? I'd say the odds are very, very good. I could start growing lettuce in there, which doesn't require a whole lot more than the fish provide, and I could probably get my money back in no time at all, especially with the whole E. coli scare going on right now with lettuce. So, yeah. Growing it at home has value that way too, because you're not spending money on, well, treating potential diseases that could be brought into your family by not knowing where your food is coming from. It's always better to know where your food is coming from, and in my personal opinion, that is worth any extra that my food may cost out of this aquaponic garden. But as I said, long term, and it's an investment, and this is going to be paying me in the long run because it is in my basement. It can run 12 months of the year. In fact, because I live in the prairies and my heater doesn't come on in the summertime, this will do better in the winter than it's doing now in the summer because it'll be warmer down here. Now, do I recommend people go out and spend, you know, several $100s on a pre-built hydroponic garden? No, I really don't. If you've got the money to spend, great. If you don't feel like necessarily engineering something yourself, great. This garden converted as easily as adding fish instead of nutrients. done, okay? I lifted it up a little bit because I wanted to. Technically, I didn't have to. Could have just opened the little viewing cover that you top up the water in there. Those fish would have had enough light and been fine. In fact, fish kind of like to hide, so they might have even been happier with the lid on there. It's not what they're getting, though. So at the end of the day, and or at the end of the video, aquaponics, is it worth the money you put into it? Yeah, I think it is. I think it's very much worth it. There are a lot of other benefits that go along with aquaponic gardening that I didn't cover in this video, but are a lot more focused, or a lot more, what's the word, relevant, I should say, to people who live in dense urban environments. And let's face it, I live in Manitoba. Our population density is like 1 person per square mile or something. So this is not an overly packed urban type area. Living in, say, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, any of those larger Canadian cities, and don't even get me started on the number of larger American cities that could benefit from something like this, because it doesn't matter how polluted the soil is. You can still garden. But like I said, that is a topic for another video, and we will get to that another day. I hope for some of you anyway, this has kind of answered whether or not aquaponics is actually worth it. I've said it several times. I'm going to say it again. In my opinion, it is absolutely worth it, and they do absolutely pay for themselves. You can build these things nice and cheap. I know, I've done it. You can build these things overly expensive and have a $10,000 tomato. I know, I've basically done that here, but like I said, this garden was a gift, so I don't feel like I'm wasting investment dollars there that could have been put towards something like, oh, I don't know, a greenhouse structure. Because if I was doing this on my own cash, that is the order I would have done things in. I would have built the greenhouse, and then I would have built the aquaponics. But it is what it is. The universe is a fascinating place, and it likes to give me the pieces to the puzzle in a mixed up order, so it's not all easy for me to put it together. So, yes. Anyway, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're new to the channel, by all means, feel free to subscribe. I put out videos on a frighteningly regular basis, pretty much just skip Mondays. And if you enjoy what you see here, if you enjoy the channel, if you enjoy all the daily videos, feel free to look down under the description for a link to the Patreon page. Every dollar helps, and we do appreciate everything you guys do, and we do appreciate the support. And on that note, I will let you guys go, and I will see you tomorrow.